The Faith Research Network, supported by the National Institute for Health Research, is committed to developing compassionate care models that enhance families' well-being through faith-based and community-led support. Guided by community-led research to identify root causes and employing a knowledge mobilization approach to prevention, the network develops social prescribing care models that connect individuals and families to community health services, aligned with public health priorities. The network's operating system features digital platforms that collaborate with voluntary, community, faith, and social enterprise organizations and external partners to enhance institutional capacity. This is supported by a systems thinking approach, transformational leadership, resource management, and advocacy programs, delivered through communities of practice sessions, research alliances, and toolkits. The network also supports professional collaboration, workforce, and community integration as proactive civic duties and promotes cooperation for greater collective impact in neighborhoods and local communities.
Hello and welcome. I'm really pleased that we have DARYL HAGAN with us today, Senior Trial Manager. DARYL, how are you?
Hi, Rudy. Yes, I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today.
We are certainly looking forward to your presentation on the REDRESS trial. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen now with my slides. Okay. And hopefully that should be broadcasting now.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks again, Rudy, for the opportunity to speak today about the REDRESS study, which is a clinical trial which is being led by researchers at King's College Hospital and is coordinated and managed by the Clinical Trials Unit at King's College London, and we have collaborating trusts and NHS partners across the country. And so my talk today is about aiming to redress the balance of stem cell transplant in sickle cell, in balance of healthcare for sickle cell using stem cell transplant. I'm just going to give a brief introduction about myself. As we already mentioned, I'm a senior trial manager at the King's Clinical Trials Unit, and my role is in project management for clinical research. I've been working in clinical trials for the last 10 years, and what Clinical Trials Unit do is that they are involved in the delivery of high quality clinical trials and research, and we make sure that there's excellence in the design, the conduct, and the analysis, as well as the reporting of research for the benefit of patients and for wider society. So what I'm going to talk about in my presentation today, a few things. What is a clinical trial? Just to give a bit of background about what that is. I'm also going to talk about the REDRESS study in a bit more detail. What the current progress is with the REDRESS study, where we are with that, and how people can find out some more as well if they're interested. And finally, there'll be a couple of questions and a bit of discussion at the end. In terms of what is a clinical trial. So a clinical trial, it is a scientific investigation that increases healthcare knowledge. We use clinical trials in the development of new treatments such as medicines, procedures, medical devices, and these studies and tests are done in human beings and people, and they involve medical procedures, can also be behavioral interventions in people for the treatment of conditions and disease. And it's basically the main way in which researchers determine if a new treatment or intervention is safe and effective for patients. In terms of clinical trials, there are a number of phases of clinical trials. A clinical trial, and when a new medicine comes to market, it can take up to 10 years plus for that process to be fully completed. Phase 1 studies are usually focused on safety, very small, 15 to 50 participants at any one time. And once those safety profiles have been established, to go into the next phase, phase 2, which is looking more at the effectiveness, slightly bigger, about 100 participants, but we'll also be watching carefully for any side effects. And when it comes to when that stage is passed, it will go on to phase 3. And this is where we have the game-changing research involving those new medicines or those new treatments compared to the existing best standard care. And this often involves hundreds of participants and people, volunteers at phase 3. And then at phase 4, that's when you have longer term effects being observed over a greater number of proportion of participants. And just to say that when I talk a bit later about the REDRESS trial, that is a phase 3 study. So it's at that critical juncture that we want to use to determine whether a new treatment is better than what's in existence already. When it comes to participating in research and in trials, there are a number of barriers for people that can prevent people taking part. There's a fear of unknown and the potential risks. Sometimes there's new treatments, often there's new treatment procedures that people might be apprehensive about. The unforeseen complications can take a bit of time, maybe a bit inconvenient because some trials, they require frequent visits or tests and might be a bit disruptive to daily routines. There was also eligibility, strict eligibility restrictions and criteria often about those in terms of their age and their health conditions and the medications that they can be on whilst participating, which might exclude people even if they want to participate. And there's a bit of a lack of awareness and understanding about research, what it involves, and there's a bit of a misunderstanding of the research process. And that's what I'm hoping to address today in this talk and discussion. But one of the main issues is medical mistrust. And there's a history of unethical research practices, especially involving Black people and those in our communities, which have led to well-founded skepticism of the medical system and of clinical trials. And there's a concern about being not just a guinea pig, but a Black guinea pig. And those are one of the main barriers to participation for those in our communities. But there are protections for trial participants that have been in place for a long time and are continually evolving and making sure that they're refined to that participants are well protected. And the main practice guidelines are the International Council for Harmonization and Good Clinical Practice, ICH-GCHP, which is a set of international and ethical scientific quality standards that guide the design, conduct, recording, and reporting of clinical trials. And it focuses on patient safety and data integrity, making sure that informed consent is at the forefront of any participant, and it requires qualified investigators and accurate data collection. And these GCP guidance is what underpins the legal protections of trials in the UK. This leads to a whole kind of infrastructure that is required for any participant or for any trial to begin. It must obtain regulatory approval from the MHRA and from the Health Research Authority. There's an ethics committee that reviews the protocol and the documents and the process of which must be obtained before any trial can begin. And as I mentioned, informed consent is what is at the forefront of every protection. And as trials open and they go on, there's ongoing monitoring to make sure that the participants are closely observed for any adverse reactions. Participants are also have the right to withdraw from any time for any reason without any penalty, ensuring that their healthcare is prioritized. And there is a confidentiality aspect of it as well, in which any personal information and medical records must be kept confidential. So there are those protections in place for trial participants when taking on or volunteering for a clinical trial. And there are a number of reasons why people might participate in a clinical trial. Some are altruistic, they want to help others and push forward scientific research. Some are looking for an alternative therapy that might not be available currently. And if a new medicine has then become that has then come onto the market and needs to be tested, it helps us with our understanding and providing a bit more evidence and data for those that can then be used for people going and inform doctors' choices going forward. So now that I've talked about clinical trials and the background of that, I really want to get into the REDRESS study and what this research is about. And this research is about participants with sickle cell disorder. So many of people in our communities might be aware of sickle cell, but just as a bit of a background, it's an inherited condition in which the red blood cells are usually circular, but under stress, such as cold conditions or any other stressful environments that might trigger those red blood cells that carry the oxygen to be sickle-shaped or C-shaped. And this causes a wide range of systemic issues. We can see here on this slide, it's a life-limiting condition, and it affects almost every area of the body. 1 in 10 will experience a stroke by the age of 20, which is quite serious. But one of the things that is most common is pain. People with severe sickle cell will experience 50%, 54% of the days with pain. And those will often have a sickle crisis where a pain event, which means that they are often hospitalized. So that's what the condition that we're looking at in REDRESS. And I just want to go through just quickly, if I'm permitted, a quick quiz that Dr. Stephen Okoli, who is a senior consultant hematologist at Hammersmith Hospital in West London, what he's advised, and is a really good thing to put into perspective. So with sickle cell, many people will know that the primary ethnic groups that affects are those from the African and Caribbean community. There's over 17,000 patients that are impacted nationally. And it's a genetic abnormality that's been known for a long time, first identified in 1956. Here it says there's drug developed for the disease is 3, but actually recently some things have been pulled from the market. And in fact, there's only probably just one really that is used routinely in practice at the moment. And transplant, which I'm going to be talking about a bit more detail, has been available in adults since 2019. Now, a comparator condition is cystic fibrosis, which is a similar inherited condition, which is a life-limiting disorder, and it affects the lungs and the digestive system, in which there's not enough water that comes into the lungs and the digestive system, and so people with cystic fibrosis produce thick, sticky mucus, which can cause them to have breathing problems and a lot of infections. And so it's kind of a good comparator in this sense. When we have a look here, the main ethnic groups that are affected are predominantly white or those from European heritage. About 10,500 patients are affected in the UK with this condition, and the genetic abnormality was identified in 1988. But one of the reasons why I wanted to present this here is that there is a bit of there is a stark imbalance when it comes to the treatment of sickle cell compared to cystic fibrosis, in that the numbers of drugs developed for this condition is 511 compared to the 3 or the 1 that's now available for sickle cell. And transplant has been available for participants or for patients, since 1989. And so we see that there's an imbalance in the treatment of these similar inherited conditions. And that's why it brings us to the REDRESS study. Now, what is the REDRESS study? I'll just give a bit of background and rationale. As I mentioned, sickle cell is an inherited condition. Abnormality of hemoglobin causes the red blood cells to become sickle-shaped, and patients will need to have lifelong healthcare and access to the NHS services, especially those who have sickle cell. In order, the main treatments are regular blood transfusions or a medication called hydroxycarbamide, which might not be well tolerated by a large number of people. And when it comes to stem cell transplant, which is the key thing here, stem cell transplant is available for those with sickle cell, and it's been established as a curative treatment. High success rates, 85 to 87%, but it's only available for those who have a full sibling donor. I'm going to talk about that a bit more. What does that mean? A fully matched sibling donor. But the issue we have here is that most of the population with sickle cell, 70%, do not have a suitable full sibling match donor. But haplo or half-match family donors are almost universally available. Most people will have a half-match donor, and we have some newer transplant protocols that enable haplo-identical or half-match stem cell transplant to be available as the treatment for sickle cell. It's currently available for those under the 18 in the UK, but has not been established as suitable for those over 18 adults because of the increased risk with haploidentical transplant. So what we need here, what we've shown here, is that we must get more evidence. And one of the crucial important elements is that it needs to be demonstrated as a cost-effective treatment compared to the standard care. Are the costs associated with stem cell transplant offset by the savings that we have from patients accessing curative treatment? So as I mentioned, what is the difference between a full sibling or a haplo sibling or a haplo donor? Now, donor matching, which is what this is about human leukocyte antigen, which are proteins on the surface of the cells in your body. Now, these are inherited from your mother and from your father. And what you will see here is that you get half of those antigens from your mom, half from your dad. And for a fully matched sibling, it's only a 1 in 4 chance that anyone will be a fully matched sibling. And these HLA antibodies, these proteins on the surface of your cells are very important because it determines whether there is an acceptance or rejection of the stem cell transplant. But what you will find here is that there is more opportunity, or there's a higher chance, about 50% chance of a sibling being a half match, but also your parents will both be a half match for those when it comes to inheriting those HLA antibodies and those HLA antigens, on the surface of your cells. So a half match donor could be a child, parent, sibling, could even be an aunt, an uncle, or cousin. It could be anyone that has sickle trait, and that would then enable them to be a haplo or half-match donor, which vastly widens the pool of patients that would be able to access this treatment. And that's what we're aiming to do. That's the aim for this redress study, is that we know that haplo transplant has a high chance of being safe and effective treatment, but we need more evidence to demonstrate that. And we also want to show that the haplo transplant is worth the cost to the NHS. And that's the main reason, or the main driver behind the trial. So what is a stem cell or bone marrow transplant? That's a question that people might be on the lips of people. And so when it comes to a bone marrow transplant, the process is quite involved. Bone marrow or stem cells are taken from your donor, which is a relative, usually a sibling, can be a parent. And what happens is that once those once the transplant is initiated, the patient or the recipient of those donor cells are going to come into hospital for about a week before the actual stem cell transplant happens. And there is a process of conditioning in which the patient will receive some chemotherapy regimen, some radiation, to prepare their body to receive the donor stem cells from their sibling or from their parent or from their relative. And this will make sure that the immune system is suppressed, so that they're less likely to reject that transplant of stem cells from their donor. Once that's gone through that conditioning process, The stem cells are then infused via like similar to a blood transfusion to the patient. And there is a lengthy process of recovery. A patient would then be in hospital maybe for up to 3 months as they recover and build up their immune system, and the new stem cells, the donor stem cells, get used to their new home in the patient's body. And then there's an active process of observation and monitoring from the doctors thereafter, to make sure that there's minimal side effects to that procedure. So what does the study involve then? So this is the process. What does the study involve? So there is an element of randomization and treatment allocation, which means that a patient or a volunteer that comes into the study has a 50-50 chance of being allocated to have the transplant or to be standard care. This is an important element because we need to be able to compare what someone that has the intervention compared to someone that doesn't have the intervention, and whether that genuinely does cause better outcomes. And that's very important for the study integrity. And then we would ask people to provide some information to us over every 3 months over a 2-year period. Once they enroll in the study, we'll be asking them for blood and urine sample donations so we can analyze what's been going on in the system, whether there has been any effects at the blood and molecular level. We collect some data about how they're faring in terms of their quality of life and other elements there. And once we've collated that information over the 2 years for every participant, we're going to analyze it and publish it in these peer-reviewed journals that that professionals and clinical colleagues would then use to make judgments about whether the treatment is safe and effective. In terms of where we are at this moment with the study, so the study is currently open. We received our regulatory approvals that I mentioned both before, the protections, back in November 2022. But this is a long process for a trial. At phase 3 can take about 3 to 5 years to complete. And the study's been open since 2023. We have centers across the country. We have 11 centers across the country. We have a number of sites in London. We have a site in Sheffield, Manchester, Bristol, and Birmingham to get to coverage across the country for patients in those areas. And if you're not necessarily in that area, then one of those centers will act as a regional center in which that patients nearby will then feed into. And we've enrolled 30 participants so far onto this study, but we need much more volunteers in order to achieve the right number of participants that we're able to determine conclusively whether this treatment is safe, effective, and also crucially is worth the cost to the NHS. So that's why I've come here to talk about this study today, to share that information about the trial and that this is going on, and for it to be shared with amongst those in the community, those in families and friends and colleagues alike as well. Now, when it comes to REDRESS, it's a project that involves a large number of people. This is the teams led by Dr. Victoria Potter, who is a transplant director at King's College Hospital. And we also have Dr. Rachel Kessie-Adu, who is a consultant hematologist at Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital. And they are the leads for this project alongside Dr. Ben Carpenter, who is an expert in transplantation as well. But we have a wide range of people that are involved in running this project, analyzing and ensuring that it is going to produce the outcomes that we need to determine and answer our research question. Now, before I finish, I'm just going to do a bit of a plug for our explainer video as well, in which is out now. We have had some volunteers to come and sickle cell warriors to come and talk about their lived experience of living with sickle cell. And we also explained it with some really neat animations about the transplant process and procedure and what's really involved in the redress study. You can find the video on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. It's also available on our website, and I'm sure Rudy will share links and information with all those who would wish to find it as well. And of course, if you wish to find out more, you can what we have been asking those who maybe are who live with sickle cell or know people that live with sickle cell to ask their doctor about the redress study. But also you can visit our website, redresstrial.co.uk, and you can contact us at redress@kcl.ac.uk. And you can also follow us on X, redress_study. And if you scan this QR code, it will take you to our website. So that was just a whistle-stop tour about the redress study and about a bit of background about research and trials and what we're involved in. So I really appreciate the time to be able to talk about that and to share about the redress trial. I'll leave it there, and I'll hand back to Rudy if you've got any questions for me or anything that you would like me to explore a bit further. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Daryl. Informative and comprehensive. Just a couple of questions. What role have patient voices played in shaping the redress trial?
Yes, that's a good question. So when it comes to the patient voices and working with patients and those in the community, there has been a big involvement. So we have partnered with the Sickle Cell Society for the development of this for this research, and patient voices have been involved in every stage of the progress of the trial so far. And so we have a patient voice sitting on our oversight committees that make sure that the trial is running as it should. We also have a patient advisory group that we consult on a regular basis about different issues to do with the trial in terms of the documentation, how we get access to sharing information about the trial with patients and communities. And also the patient advisory group was integral to the development of that explainer video that I mentioned earlier, and was given feedback about the development of the video, and what are the key elements or areas that we need to cover in that video as well. And finally, we will be still involving patients when it comes to disseminating that information, or how they would like us to share that, and how that would be digestible for people when that time comes.
Yeah, and of course, with that is the expectation of the social media community networks that the families and communities come from themselves.
Absolutely.
Just finally, in terms of the call to action, if you could just reiterate how patients, families can actually find out if they're eligible to take part in the trial.
Yes. So in terms of finding out if they're eligible, that's where it's important to work closely with local physicians and consultants, because it's not a trial in which you'll be able to self-assess eligibility. The eligibility would come from screening assessments that would go through your healthcare professionals, consultant doctors, etc. So that's why the main thing is to talk for those who are living with sickle cell, to talk about this trial to their doctor. But it's really also helpful for those who are supporters or those who are just interested to share the information about the trial, share the website, share the video, and absolutely get in contact with us via email or via social media about the study, and that would be the first point of call, and then we can route people to take the necessary steps in order to find out if this is something that would be suitable for them or suitable for any of their family members or friends. It's not a therapy that's necessarily for everybody, or those are the treatment steps that are for everybody. But if it is a suitable option for those with sickle cell, then the only way to be able to get a haplotransplant currently in this country is through this trial and through this research. So yeah, definitely get in touch and share the information as much as widely as possible.
Thank you very much for that, and very well done. And that was DARYL HAGAN, Senior Trial Manager for the REDRESS study. Thank you, Daniel, and good day.
Thank you,
Daryl.
really. Thank you. Take care.